Hi, this is Ariane from Sociable Art. Today I'm going to paint Poppies in the Rain, which is a painting that I created about 5 years ago. So hopefully I can remember how I painted it. I'm going to use oxide green, which is kind of a darker shade of green, cobalt blue, white, might use some of this turquoise, a light bright yellow, red, a little bit of orange, which of course you can mix from the green, the red and the yellow. And then I have teal, which you could also mix. You don't have to have that. You can mix it from the green and the blue and the white. And then I also have black. And for brushes, probably just need 2 or 3 brushes, but I have several. These are the ones I'm using today. Just a little variety of sizes, and I have square tip brushes and also the filberts, the rounded ones. Not quite sure which I'm going to use yet. And make sure you have your cup of water and paper towels handy. And I am just now wetting my larger brush. And I'm going to start by just putting some basic washes of color into the background. And in this corner, this is going to be, I think, my lighter corner. So I'm going to have some turquoise. And I'm going to add some white into it as I go. And I want it to look, I'm doing these vertical strokes and also painting the sides of the canvas and the top. I'm doing the vertical strokes because I want to have the brush stroke showing so it'll look sort of like it's raining. And that's why I'm adding different shades into the paint as I go. I don't want it to be just one uniform shade. And I can also dip into some of my other shades, like I can put some cobalt blue in as I go, and I want to blend it a little but not too much. And when I get down here to this leaf area, the green area below, you don't have to be perfect about how that looks yet, because of course I'll go over it with my green in a little bit. And I'm going to wet my brush again. I want to have my paint a little bit wet. So the teal with white added to it. And as I get down to the poppy, I want to go around it. So I'm just using the edge of this square tip brush to go around the edge of the poppy. And you can see that I'm getting, I have these brush strokes that are not vertical. For right now, that's okay, but I'm going to want to fix that. So after I lay in the color around the flower, then I'm going to take the brush and make sure that I still have vertical lines here. You have to be careful where you end your brush strokes, because you'll see that little place where you stop. You want this to be kind of continuous looking. And as this dries and we go back to put another coat, we can touch that up more. So it doesn't have to be perfect yet. And in fact, of course, nothing has to be perfect in art, but we can fix that up in a little bit. Just want to make sure to continue to add a variety of shades in. So I'm going to add a little more of the cobalt blue down here. Now it's not straight cobalt blue. I have the teal mixed in with it as well. It's actually a very sunny day today. I wish that it was raining so I could have inspiration, in the window in the background. It'd be nice if we had some rain falling down the window. And it's okay if you get a little bit of your paint into the sketch that you've done of your flowers, because you can just correct that later. So I want to add just a little bit of my green into this area too. So I mixed it in with a little of the teal first, or you can mix it as you put it onto the canvas. I need to get my brush wet again because it's kind of, the paint isn't flowing as well as I want. If you're having trouble getting your paint to keep flowing as long as you want it to, and you can fill your brush up a little bit better, and you can also add water to your paint. Add some down here. This is, down here I'm adding again a little bit of green mixed with the blue. It's a little wet, so I'm going to go ahead and just use my paper towel and make sure, I didn't want it to drip down the canvas. So I just dabbed it with my paper towel before it could drip. And I hope that when you're painting, you have some music going in the background. I just wanted to make sure that you could hear all my directions really well, so I didn't want to have music. But I really enjoy having music playing while I paint. It's like it almost becomes part of the painting. So I've stuck with this color kind of long. So I want to make sure to add some of the other shades, maybe back to some of the blue. This is cobalt blue. And what I've done is I didn't clean my brush. So it's naturally mixing a little bit with that teal shade, the teal green shade that I was using. You see, I kind of sometimes keep going back to some of the other areas, and I'm going to go back and add a second coat as well. But, you know, no part of the painting ever has to be finished. You can always return to it. Cobalt blue. And what I want to do in this area is I have this cobalt blue here, and then I want to have it kind of look like it drips out from beneath the flower as well. And I don't know if you notice this, but every once in a while I'm taking my brush and I'm turning it and using the skinny edge of it. So I can use the flat to get some of the bigger areas. And then when I want to get a thinner line, then I just switch to the skinny side of the brush. I just want to make it look like that cobalt blue is dripping out from beneath the flower. And this shade of blue is going to look really nice when I fill the red in. Some down here. And then I'm going to go back to adding some teal in. I want it to be a little bit lighter. Even lighter still, I think. Maybe just a touch of green added in this area too. Don't forget to get the sides of your canvas. It's easier to get them as you go than to have to fill them later. You won't be able to match the color later. Oops. I'm just going back and smoothing some of these areas, blending a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to add some second coats. Adding some of this blue. I want some deeper shades of blue coming up from the top of this flower. So I'm going to start on the edge there, and then I'm just going to pull up with the skinny side of my brush. It's a little wet, so I'm still not getting the deep color that I want, so I might have to go back to that when it's a little drier. Do the same thing over here. Notice I'm tilting my brush lots of different directions to kind of get the look that I want of the water dripping. A little more of this blue on this flower. Yeah, I still can't get that deep color there because I have a wet area, and if your canvas gets too wet, and the paint gets too wet, you just can't work with it until it dries a little bit. So we might have to go back to that. And then I'm just going to go back with the turquoise and white to this corner. So I think I have a little bit of areas of canvas showing there. I don't want that. No canvas showing. And this down here looks a little bit, I want it just to be a little bit deeper in color. It's too watery looking. There's going to be some drips of white that I'm going to be adding, but not yet. So we'll do that later. Some of the areas at the top here, at the top of the canvas, are a little rough looking, so I'm just kind of touching those up. And then I got a little bit of green. Pull up. Oh, I need some white added to that. The key to getting these colors to kind of blend a bit is not to use tons of paint and have them both the shades that you want to blend together wet at the same time so they can blend. And if one of them has dried, you can go back and just add that first color back in so you'll have a wet color to blend with. And there is an area below this flower too that I kind of forgot. I'm going to switch to this smaller square brush. I'm going to dab this area here because it's still so wet and I cannot add that deeper blue in there because it's so wet. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I love working with paper towels. I'd love to leave all this texture on here, and you can do that on yours if you want to. Now I'm going back to that deep blue and I'm going to add it, try to add it back in this area, see if I can get it to show up better this time. Well, I don't know how much better that is, but at least you can see some blue in that area. Just doing some vertical lines like dripping from the top of the canvas. You really end up getting most of this dripping look from the white that we'll be adding later. And if you want to, I didn't do this in the original, so I'm not going to do it on this one, but you can take water on your brush and you can drip it from the top and you'll really get a dripping look. But I did not do that in the original, and I want to stay true to that for now. But feel free to experiment on yours and add some real drips. And you can also use a wet brush to kind of pull some paint off like this. Oops, let me get it down there. So this is just a wet brush that you can use to kind of pull some paint off. Just rubbing it on there. And then, so right now I have kind of, it looks almost striped. It's got a lot of lines in it. And if you want it to be a little more blended and a little smoother than that, you can get like a filbert, get it damp, but get most of the water out of it so that it's barely wet, like dry it off on the paper towel. And you can kind of use it to kind of smooth out some of the areas. You don't want to blend it completely. I'm using a really light touch, but it will just make it a little blended. And I don't mind getting it into these flower areas, the white flowers, too much, because I'm going to cover that with color soon, so it doesn't matter if I get a little bit in there. those areas where the white is showing is only because it was wet there. So when I rubbed, paint came off. So you can add that back in if you don't want all those white areas. We're not ready to add the white yet, so I'm gonna fill that in for now. Might even need to do a second coat. Sometimes things don't come out exactly the way you planned. And that's the great thing about paint, is you can just paint right over the areas that don't look the way that you want them to. Nothing is set in stone. This isn't sculpture. Okay, good enough for now. Now I'm going to go down and add the green shades to the bottom. And I would like to use a filbert with a rounded end for that. I get my brush wet. And I have the green shade, and I'm going to do green mixed with white, and green mixed with black. There's going to be darker and lighter areas throughout. And I'm not sure if I'm going to love this green or not, but beneath my green I have another brighter shade of green, because I think this one that I'm using is a little bit too dull. So I have a brighter green that I can kind of mix in with it. And in this upper corner here, there's definitely some white added to this green. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, like that. It has to be different enough to show against what's above it, though. Oops, too dark. I don't know how I got all that dark on my brush. Wipe some of that off. This is my eraser. So along this line where the two areas kind of connect, you're just gonna turn your brush sideways and just kind of have an irregular edge. And you're supposed to just be thinking of, these are leaves, kind of some greenery just popping up from down here. And we're gonna define it much more later. So it doesn't have to be very defined yet. One thing you can do eventually as you're filling in is you kind of put some leaf shapes into this area. Just the idea of some big leaf shapes. Nothing defined yet. Going around this little flower down here, and then blending the brush strokes into the background. Okay, so one thing I want to pause for is down here at the bottom. I'm gonna want to have some darker areas. So I need to have black mixed with green ready for down here. So I want this to be quite darker. And same thing down here as you're adding this darker shade. You want to have kind of the idea of some leaf shapes in here as you're filling in. Nothing defined, just the idea of it. So the lighter green up here at the top. And you can even do, I really like to have in some areas like a blue green. Maybe in this area, just some of this blue green. I have a little black in the brush and I don't want black everywhere throughout, so I'm gonna get that black out. Go back to this blue-green. And then a little bit of the black mixed with the green under this flower, because I think there would be like a shadowed area here. And then have the brush strokes, kind of smooth the brush strokes down from there. While I have this black and green, I'm just going to add some of it down here, and I think I'll put a leaf on top of this, but for right now I'm just going to add that. I'll define some of this later. I just want to fill it in right now, and then I'll put some more on top. Here's the green mixed with black again. This corner is very dark, so I'm going to start with this really dark area, and then I'll move over and blend in with the medium area. I know this looks like black, but it's black mixed with green. And this really dark shade is going to look really nice against this green flower. It's almost like, turned out to be like a very dark olive shade. And why does green look really good against a red flower is because it's opposite on the color wheel. So it really makes that color pop. More black and green down here. And if you are having trouble with, like if you keep seeing the canvas showing through, you might want to just add a little water to your paint to make it a thinner paint that will fill into the grooves in the canvas. Here I'm doing again the green mixed with black under this flower, because this would be kind of a shadowed area too. And if you have trouble using this big a brush to get in these little areas between the flowers, please go ahead and switch to a brush that you are more comfortable with. I just like to cover as much ground as I can quickly. Get the edge too, the sides of the canvas. Unless you know you're going to frame it, then you don't need to, because nobody will see the sides. Okay. More water in my paint. Now I'm just going to add this little interesting little green and blue, green and teal and white area in here, a little hollow sort of that's lighter. And I'll make this blend in a little better later. I want more of that green, teal, and white shade up here. Whoops, too wet. just doing green and teal and white, and it's kind of blending into this area that was already on the canvas underneath this flower. And don't worry that this looks a little rough so far. That was just our first go at it, and we're gonna go back and make sure to make it look a little more finished. Take this color and put it over here. I also missed the side over here, so I'm gonna get that. So when I go back to these areas to get more color in here, I'm really going to be thinking about where are some leaves in here, and they're not going to look, you know, like perfect leaves. This is supposed to be sort of a little bit abstract, so you're not going to say, oh, that's a perfect little leaf right there, and there's another one. It's just kind of the idea of them being back here. Too bright a green there. Just going around adding more color into this area. And this is the black and the green down here. Every once in a while I keep picking up a color that I am not going for, so I can just wipe that off. Try again. I'm getting a really bright shade that I don't want in there. Need some more color in this area, and so I'm going back to the white, teal, and green. it back in. I'm going to switch to a deeper green. Too black. So I'll just cover it up. Okay, and this is the green mixed with the black again. And as I'm adding the second coat to this area of the green and the black, I just added kind of the idea of a leaf shape in there. And I have to say, if I was using a higher quality paint, this is student grade acrylic. If I was using a higher quality paint, I wouldn't continually have to be like coming back so many times probably and adding so much color, because the pigment would be stronger and I'd get more of the color I want the first time. Just so you know, if you want to spend a little more money on your paints, it's just I go through so many with the classes that I can't really spend a ton of money on the paint. Okay, and I just want to make sure I don't lose the darkness down here at the bottom. Make sure there's enough of that black down here too. I want to create some good contrast. Okay, and then another option is to add a little blue mixed with green. I don't think we've done that yet. And that might be nice to kind of pull the colors from the top down to the bottom a little bit, adding this bluish shade of green as we add a little bit of definition, like the idea of some leaves down here. White added with the green. Kind of create some lighter areas of greenery. These ones, you know, might show up a little more. Just using the shape of this square tip brush to kind of makes it easy to create a leaf shape. You just kind of press down and then let up and it'll do the tip of your leaf. Not crazy about that. Don't want that there. This is green mixed with blue and white. I think we'll leave this area over here just kind of abstract. And this is white with teal. And this is the white with the teal again. I just use that to define a little leaf area right there. And I'm using that light shade teal mixed with white around this leaf. Maybe some in there too. Maybe just a little bit in here. The only other thing would be that down here at the bottom, I can see a little bit my canvas showing through, so I'm just adding some more color. More green mixed with black. Or you could do green and blue mixed with black. I think I lost a little of my contrast, so I want to add a little bit more black into that area. Green, blue, and black. Don't want to lose all the darkness here either. The contrast is very important, and it's hard for some people to do contrast. They end up with a very pastel kind of background, and if you really want it to be dramatic, you want to have some dark colors for that red to just kind of show up really well on. Okay. And if I were not doing this on video, if I was just doing it on my own, I would probably spend more time on all of that. But in the interest of time and making a video that I'm able to download, I'm going to keep on moving ahead. And now I want to create some white areas. So above the greenery line, there are some straight white areas. And to me, what it looks like is one rain is falling down from the sky, but then it's almost like splashing up or glowing from the top of these leaves. So I'm using a square tip medium brush, and I'm starting along the leaf line and just kind of pulling up. And occasionally I want to pull up some longer lines and turn my brush sideways and get some nice skinny lines so it looks like it's dripping down or splashing up from there. And always take your brush, flatten it out on the palette so you have a nice thin edge to it. And you don't, if you let it get too full of paint, then you're gonna have a fat end to your brush and you won't be able to get those thin little lines pulling up from the top. And really, to get this really nice and white, I'm probably gonna go back and have to add a second coat. Not quite as brilliant a white as I want it to be. But you get the idea. And some, underneath the flowers, you can have some of the white lines drip right down from the flower into your area here. And you might find you like using a smaller skinny brush. Some of the areas don't have quite as much. You could just kind of barely put a little white outline, like it's a wet tip to a leaf. Now in this area, we're gonna come down to this flower. This flower is gonna end up having white splashing up from it also. And like I said, it's important to make these white areas eventually want to be very white. But that you'll need to add a second coat. And you probably want to do that later once you've filled in the flowers, because some of the white outline will be on the flowers as well. Here's a drip coming from the top of the flower. I mean, it's not coming from the top, it's coming from the top of the canvas down to the flower. Now we really want these white areas to glow. And it might take a second coat of this cheaper paint to make that happen. So a little drip coming down. You can do as many of these as you want. I really gobbed some white on there because I really want this to glow. There's going to be white splashing up from here too, but I got to wait till I fill in that flower in the background. So I'm just going to avoid that area for now. So consider this step one of doing this white splashes. And also, since you're not probably teaching classes, I would suggest you spend money on better paint than this, and you'll be much happier with the opaqueness, or is it opacity? I'm not sure. And you won't have to do these several coats. This one's gonna have, this poppy is gonna have a nice drip of water coming off of it. While I am doing that, I can also fill in some of this area where I got some of the blue paint in here. I might as well fill that in now, because if I don't cover it with white, if you have 8 areas that you got paint on in your flower and you don't cover it with white first, with this grade of paint, the red that I put in here will not cover those areas, so you'll see the blue. So I'm gonna touch that up while I'm at it. Some area here. There's a little turquoise in that one. Okay, now this one is dripping down into this area too. It's dripping down and it's gonna hit this flower. And splash up from the flower. Let's have a drip coming off here. Splash. And then we're going to outline a little and do the same thing with the white around this flower. Having drips coming from this one down onto the one below it. Okay, so now there's also some of the white coming down from the top here. You can kind of lift your brush and do a broken line. And over here. And it's going to splash down on the flower here. We'll get some of those lines splashing up. There. Maybe a little bit here. This I'm not using much paint here. I'm just kind of rubbing it down, so I don't want it to stand out that much there. Going back and adding some here because the blue is showing through. Now, there's also some around this flower in the same way that we have been adding it to the other areas. Boy, I wish this white was better and that it would be showing up more. And it's dripping down over on this side too. Just had to get up to make sure I was still recording. I just had this horrified thought that I just did this entire painting and forgot to hit record. I would have been so sad. Well, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I would just have to do it again. I just picked up some black in there by accident. It's still wet down there, and I've got the wet black is still in there. Okay, and then this one, a little bit of water's dripping from the bottom of it. And we can add some more of this. Like this one has some drops too, but I think I'll add them later because it's going to drop onto the other one. And I just need to go back and make some of these areas more white. a second coat of white to cover up the blue that I have on here. And more of the white added here to make this more opaque. Just continuing to add white on top of my white that I already added to make it more opaque. And up here too, I want that to be whiter. Okay, couple other little areas which I might as well add while I've got the white. I think there's a nice little area of dripping here that drips into the green area and then it trickles down a leaf. And maybe it trickles down the edge of this leaf too. And could put a little bit down here. Maybe right here on the edge of this leaf. And this still needs more white. If you're trying to think of a Christmas present or a birthday present to get me, some better white paint, please, because this is horrible. All right, good for now. And now let's go to the flowers. And this is when the painting really comes to life, when we add these beautiful red flowers. And I'm sorry, I couldn't resist adding a little more dripping over in this corner. Thought it might look good to put a little bit of larger areas of dripping. Okay, so the poppies. So we're gonna use the red, some orange, white added to the areas for highlighted areas, and then you have obviously the dark centers, but we're not gonna do that yet. So red mixed with the orange, because I think the red on its own, we can use the red on its own for the darkest areas, but red mixed with orange. I'm gonna start on this one. And I'm just making sure that the edges of my flower petals are not totally smooth. They have a little bit of a broken edge to them. So this is just one solid color to begin with. I'm just going to work it along this area, just filling in one petal at a time. Because your next question would be, how do I get the petals to look like they're separate, to stand out from each other if we're using this same color? So what you want to do is create contrast between the petals, either lighter areas or darker areas. So in this little area right here, which you might need to use a smaller brush, while it's wet, you want to add a darker area. And so I have just a dab of green mixed with black. And you can mix this into your red paint beforehand, not doing it this way. I mean, this here I'm going to mix it on the canvas, but what you could do is just mix it in your palette. Mix this shade of darker red, which is going to be red mixed with the green and black. So I had some green and black already in my palette from the area down here, and I just mixed them in with the red. Okay, so I just created a darker area so the next petal will stand out against it. And while I have that shade of the black mixed with the green and orange, I'm going to add some in here because I'm going to need that next. And I went around the area where the black is, the black center of the flower. I'm leaving that till later. Okay, maybe a little here too, just to have this one stand out. And the key is, so you create that shade. Look, I'm using my finger to mix. And you blend it into the wet red paint next to it. You're going to use this down here too, and you could already go ahead and add it if you can get to it quickly enough that it doesn't dry, and you can blend it in with the next shade. Maybe a little bit down here too. Okay, back to red and orange. And it doesn't have to stand out perfectly well against the other petal yet, because what we have is a little cheat that we're going to do later where we add this little line of white along the top of this petal, and it will totally separate it from the other one. And we do that as if it's got water glistening on it, and it separates the petals really well. So here I'm doing that little gnat. I don't know if you could see that in the video, but there was a little gnat just flying around. I think it thought these were real flowers. I did this shade just a little more orange, so maybe it would stand out from the one next to it. And then the one next to that, I'm going to add a little white in with my paint so that it will stand out as a lighter shade next to it. And this white added to the orange and red I'm going to put in here as well. that area in there is going to be black eventually. Straight red right here. And we're going to add some white highlights that will really make this look a little more detailed in a little bit, but we're going to let it dry a little bit. And we'll move on to the next one. So the next one we can do is down here. I've got straight red on my brush right now. So I think it's a little darker down here, so this could be straight red. I don't want to lose that kind of ruffled edge to this flower. This red paint is quite thick, so I might need to add a little water to it. Now one thing that I added to this flower that I did not to the other one is some kind of dark lines, and I'll show you what I mean, where I'm going to use the black mixed with green and kind of do some ruffles in the petals. But first, let me go ahead and fill this one in the front, and I'll just add a little orange and white to that so it stands out. And this too, but I want to leave a space for that black center too. And I want this petal to fade into red. And again, it might seem like we have a ton of definition there, but we add it with the white highlights, and also this black and red that I'm about to add. Black mixed with black and green mixed with red. And I actually want to switch to a skinnier brush for this. Got my skinny brush. Black and green mixed with red, and I'm just gonna start, and there's a little hollow down here under this cup in the flower. And then there are some kind of like little lines like this. It's like there's little like pleats in the petals, kind of wrinkles in the flower petal. And don't worry if they're standing out too much, because you can put a second coat of red over top of them when they dry, and they'll still appear, but they will blend more. Sometimes you have to use your finger to blend. Okay, and I'm going to add a second coat of red on top of that and the white highlights in a little bit. I I just noticed a part I wanted to touch up right there. There was a little bit of canvas showing. Don't want that. Okay, let's move on to this one. This is pretty red as well. We have some other ones that are going to be kind of peach color. That's why I'm kind of waiting on those ones. Another paper towel. Okay. Mostly red on this one. For the bottom petals, I would stick to mostly the red shade. There's not a whole lot of definition to them. You can just do mostly just red. Starting with these lower petals. I love this red against the green. It just pops right out. Poppies are one of my favorite flowers to paint. Okay, then I have a little of the black and green mixed with the red. This dark area here next to this little cup in the flower. I like to call it the little cup center. And you can put a little of that over here too to separate it. I'll put a little of this darker shade here. Do red mixed with orange. Brush is too wet. I don't want my brush to be so wet, or I'm going to end up with watercolor. We've lost some definition here in this part of the flower, but we will get it back with the white. Okay, now let's move on to this flower here. Same kind of idea. We're going to do red and orange for this big part here. And add a little white to it for the part in the front here. And then add some red over here for this petal. And for right here. Okay, And then we have a petal that's kind of folded over down here. So the lower part of it can be red. And then we'll fold over a lighter area. And this can be red here. Excuse me while I let my dog out. I have a very old beagle. Okay, back to work, or back to play. Now I'm going to add white to the red and add that lighter curled over top of my petal. The light is catching the top of this, so it's got the white. Add it. This has a very fine little curled end to it that I have to get even finer brush. And there are some white lines. The way that we did those darker kind of black lines in the other petals, we're doing some white lines here to show that there are creases in the petal. Okay. I saved. Oh, one more thing I want to do on that one is get that skinny brush again, do those little darker areas. So the red mixed with the black and green. Almost forgot. And you can spend more time on this and really get some contrast and definition. I'd probably spend a little longer on each flower, but maybe not in one sitting. I'd probably go back and add some contrast areas. The more contrast, the better on something like this, I think. Dark areas around this center. Look how much it just looks so much better when you add the contrast in there. A little bit along here too, I think. And maybe under here too. If it feels good to you, add more contrast. Even going to go back to this one and add a little more in the center. I think I got a little bit lazy on this one. And then if any of your darker areas are showing up too distinctly, you can just go back and add some red on top of them and they will blend in a little bit more. doing right here. Just adding more red back on top. Like I said, I would keep playing with these for quite a while, just having fun, adding more layers of color, adding, like I would add some like orangey red shades just to certain areas of the petal. Oops, I just made a little error there. There. Just did a little dark area in there. Yeah, if you've got more time, I would pause the video and just keep on adding the contrast areas and second coats. Like, I mean, it just would look lovely to have some more orangey red added to this, make it a deeper shade. Yeah, second coat to any of these areas would look great. Okay, now we're going to want to move on to this really dark flower at the bottom here. This one's going to have some of the green and black added into these top petals. It's shadowed by the one above it, so it's going to be darker. And it really gets dark here in the center. I really think I could have made that even darker, to be honest with you. This is going to take me forever if I keep on adding to these other flowers. Let me stick with where I'm at. Pull up some dark areas up from the center and out to the ends of the petals. And this petal here is also quite dark. It's also shadowed underneath the other petals. And then the petals here and here, they're catching a little light. So they're actually red mixed with a little white. They really caught some of the light. maybe there'll be a little bit of highlight caught there. All right. This flower up here, we have much more orange and even a little yellow highlight. Could do orange with a little red and then some white added, and you'll get kind of a peachy color. And that's definitely what these other ones are. They're kind of peach colored. Really more white than that. More white added. White, red, orange. And these are not very defined. Not use a lot of paint. They're just kind of faded into the background of the canvas. This one in particular is going to end up getting covered by a lot of white, but for right now, you're just going to paint it this really light shade of peach and not a lot of paint, not a lot of definition. You can we'll put a little bit of definition, but just not yet. Let's just cover it in with this light peach first. Just a little bit of darker areas added, just not much definition necessary. These are faded in the background. Okay, then this one, we got orange mostly. I'm going to add some yellow highlights on it in a minute. So we need to switch to a smaller brush, but I do want to add this area in here. For right now, I'm going to do a red mixed with orange, so I want it to be a little bit darker in here. And you could actually add some of that darker shade and some lines here. Maybe a little bit on here. top of this the petal right here is going to have more white added into it. I'm going to do white and orange. I want it to be a little darker than that. White and orange, but not so light. And then you're going to have yellow added to this white and orange, and you can do some little highlights. Maybe a little of this yellowy shade. Oh, too dark. Yellow with the orange, maybe a little bit in here. And a little bit here. Any place else we want to add that? Maybe a touch here, just for fun. Maybe here. Here. On the edge of that petal. Any place that you think might catch a little light. All right. Now I want to add some white highlights with my skinny little brush, and also let's do the black centers first. So I would say straight black. I've been painting so long, the black has dried out, so I'm adding some white water to it, and then dab it in here. I love adding the centers because then it really starts to become a flower. You have a focal point in each flower. No, none of these centers are like perfect circles. You don't want them to be that because that's not really what it looks like. They're made up of a lot of little small dots. Well, I don't think that's actually truly the case. But they're not perfect. They don't look like perfect circles. That is for sure. This one here has some black, little black edges to some of the petals. I don't know why this one's different. And this one down here needs a dark center too. Then we need our white highlights. Gotta get all that black out of the brush. Don't want to have any remaining black. We don't need any our white that's not very good to be any duller than it already is. And while you're doing the white, if you want to take the time to make some of these areas more white, I'm not going to do it right now, but if I were going to like really finish this painting to sell or something, I would definitely make all these white areas very brilliant. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. What I'm doing is I'm adding these white highlights on the edges of some of these petals. And you want to have a very fine brush, and it's supposed to look like a little bit of water caught on the edge of the brush. I mean on the edge of the petal, not on the edge of the brush. And I'm switching brushes because that brush was terrible. My brushes are so well loved. They've been through a lot. Okay, so this is gonna catch the highlight here on the edge. I want to make sure this is nice and white here. And this top of this petal. So a lot of the, like the tops of your petals where they might be wet and glistening. Like that. And then what I like to do is have some of the water is going to drip right off of the end of the petal. So you might have some of the water run along the bottom of the petal. And I've got white here that's actually on top of this peach colored flower. Like that. Right along the edge that we didn't get earlier. Some along here. Maybe the edge of this would catch a little light. Don't want to do that one yet because we just finished painting it. It might be wet. Go down here and add some to that. Oh, it's definitely going to pour out of here for sure. That looks good. It's going to be all along the edge of this petal. More white. Though I said I wasn't going to spend time on this, but I just can't stand it. Definitely need some here. On this one, it's going to go around this area. Be careful not to smear into that wet black in the center. It's definitely going to catch some water here. And it's going to pour down all the way down the side. It's going to come out of here a little. Come down the side. And really drip off the end here. And here, cut a little bit. You really want that to look like it's dripping. this to stand out as very white. And then let's see what we've got down here. Oh, I really like this area here that it pools up right here. And then it drips down from there. And it hits this petal. And then it drips off of this petal. And then it drips off of this one. It's like cascading down from one petal to the next. Probably would catch along here as well. Definitely here. A little bit into here. Now we've got to add it onto this flower. I think this flower should be dry. You might want to check yours and make sure it's dry so you don't end up with orange rain. And we definitely want to put a highlight on this edge. Watch out for that wet black paint. And I think it would actually drip from here. I'm just looking at it. I don't think I need, I might need just a few little drips down in here. We could add a few up here. The only thing that I didn't add, looking at this and comparing it to the original, is the original had kind of some little buds in the background, like some little stems with little buds, and I actually neglected to add those, and I kind of don't want to add them now because I think it looks fine without them. But if you want to add them, you can. And as I said, I could work on this forever. I would just keep on adding and adding. And never be done. One thing I need to add before I stop filming is the centers of each flower have some little white dots in them. Make sure to overlap. Don't do them perfectly. You don't want it to look like little perfect polka dots in there. did them white first, and then you can, when they're dry, I don't have time for this right now, but when they're dry, you can add yellow on top. The reason I do white first is because the yellow is transparent and it will not show up well on the black. So that's why I do the white first, but I don't have time to let it dry and do it right. So just make sure you add that. And that's it. Thanks so much. Sociableart.com for more information.